Blocked. Everywhere. No text, no call, no warning. One day he was kissing her good morning. The next, she was staring at her phone screen like it had betrayed her. He wasn't just silent. He was gone. Instagram, blocked. Facebook, vanished. Phone, straight to voicemail. And she was 5 months pregnant. The man she once shared a bed with had erased her from his life like she was a failed draft. But he didn't just walk out on a wife. He walked out on a woman carrying his child. And what the world didn't know, not yet, was that this woman was about to go viral, telling a story no one could stop watching. A story that would captivate millions, ignite debates, spark tears, and expose one very ugly truth. Because Sophie Lane wasn't just a discarded ex, she was about to become the face of a movement. And the man who thought he could disappear, he was about to watch the internet take his name, chew it up, and spit it out. Before all the followers, the sponsors, the blue check marks, Sophie was just Sophie. She lived a quiet life on the outskirts of Seattle, illustrating children's books, drinking oat milk lattes, listening to indie playlists while sketching on her porch. She didn't wear flashy brands, she didn't chase likes, she liked plants, sunlight, and peace. And for a while, that was enough. Then came Nate Holloway. He was everything she wasn't: loud, charming, ambitious, magnetic. He worked in tech sales. One of those guys who always had a pitch, always had a solution, always had a joke. They met at a community art fair. He knocked over her matcha latte. She cursed. He laughed. She rolled her eyes. He apologized by buying all her prints. He said he'd never met a woman like her. Sensitive, creative, real. They moved in after 4 months. Got married 6 months later. It wasn't a dream wedding. It was a courthouse, 2 rings, and her best friend snapping photos on a borrowed iPhone. But she was happy. Genuinely, stupidly, heartbreakingly happy. It wasn't until the second line appeared on that pregnancy test that she realized how deeply in love she still was. She sat in the bathroom in shock, hands shaking, thinking about how Nate always talked about wanting a son. "We'll name him Oliver," he once said during a rainstorm cuddle, "or Luna if it's a girl, but let's start with a dog first." They never got the dog. Sophie waited 3 days before telling him. She planned it like a movie scene: baby shoes in a box, a card that said "You're going to be a dad." She even filmed a little clip for their future child to watch one day. Just in case. Nate opened the box, stared, blinked, no smile, no hug, just a single sentence: "I'm not ready for this." She laughed nervously. "What? Are you serious? I can't do this, Soph. I'm sorry. I thought I could, but I can't." That night, he slept on the couch. In the morning, he was gone. His toothbrush, his clothes, his cologne, all gone. The only thing left behind was the ultrasound photo she had taped to the fridge. She called him. Straight to voicemail. She texted. Nothing. By evening, she was blocked on every app. By morning, her best friend sent her a screenshot. It was Nate, at a party, with another woman. Her name was Bryn. Blonde, sculpted, filtered to perfection. The caption read, "Just good energy." Good energy. Sophie vomited into a sink. Not because of morning sickness, but because heartbreak has a way of making you physically sick. The internet didn't know her name. Not yet. But pain doesn't stay quiet forever. She posted one TikTok. Just one. Messy bun, puffy eyes, hoodie that didn't quite fit over her growing belly. "Hi," she said. "My name is Sophie. I'm 5 months pregnant. My husband blocked me on everything after I told him." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just told the truth. And that truth hit like a thunderclap across the internet. 12 hours later, 100K views. 24 hours, 1.6 million. 48 hours, 4.2 million. Brands started emailing, journalists reached out, women from all over the world flooded her inbox. "You're not alone. I was ghosted too. I needed to hear this today." The comment section became a therapy group, a rally cry, a sisterhood. Sophie Lane wasn't a victim anymore. She was a voice. But the real twist, Nate thought he knew everything about her. But he didn't know about Julian. Julian Renault. The man who once mentored Sophie in college. The man who told her she was too talented to be background noise. The man who just so happened to be the CEO of Renault Capital. A billionaire. And the baby growing inside her was technically family, because Julian was the child's godfather. And he had just watched Sophie's video. While Nate played influencer with his new blonde girlfriend, Julian made a call to Sophie. And when she picked up, tearful and shaken, he said only 5 words. "He's not the end. I am." Sophie didn't know what that meant, not yet, but she would, because the world wasn't done watching. And her story was only just beginning. She wasn't born for the spotlight, but she was made for this moment. Before the millions of views, before the sponsorship offers and blue check marks, before her face became a symbol of strength and survival, Sophie Lane was invisible. Not in the literal sense, of course. She existed, quietly, gracefully. The kind of woman who didn't interrupt, who always held the door open, who knew the names of her neighbors' dogs. She wasn't the one people stopped to compliment in the street. She wasn't the loudest laugh at the party or the center of attention in a crowd. But she was the kind of woman people missed once she was gone. Sophie was 28, born and raised in Olympia, Washington, a city hugged by pine trees and gray skies. Her mother was a piano teacher. Her father worked in a mechanic shop and read poetry on weekends. They lived in a modest two-story house with chipped paint and a porch swing that squeaked in the wind. From the moment Sophie could hold a pencil, she drew. Animals, trees, little girls with big eyes and oversized bows. She would scribble stories in the margins of her math homework, not because she hated math, but because her imagination refused to stay quiet. Her teachers called her gifted. Her classmates called her weird. She didn't mind. She had stories to tell. After high school, she enrolled at Western Washington University, majored in fine arts, minored in creative writing, lived off instant ramen, and walked everywhere because she didn't own a car. She started freelancing while still in school, drawing for indie children's books, designing wedding invitations, painting murals for local libraries. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. By 25, Sophie had built a modest client base. Nothing viral, nothing flashy, just steady, meaningful work. The kind of illustrations that made children smile and parents cry softly while reading bedtime stories. She rented a cozy apartment in Seattle, one with plants on every windowsill and thrifted furniture that smelled of stories. She didn't care about labels. Her favorite outfit was a flannel shirt, leggings, and mismatched socks. She didn't chase followers or clicks. She chased peace. Then came Nate Holloway. He blew into her life like a gust of wind, fast-talking, cologne-soaked, confident in the way only men who've never been rejected can be. He was loud where she was quiet, sharp where she was soft, a corporate salesman with a six-figure income and a 5-minute attention span. They met at a community farmer's market, of all places. He knocked over her iced tea, apologized profusely, offered to buy her lunch. She said no twice. He came back the next week. She gave him a chance, and then another. Within 6 months they were living together. She thought he saw something in her others missed. He called her the calm in my storm, said he wanted something real. Sophie didn't know then that some men fall in love with the idea of peace, but can't survive when life actually gets quiet. They got married in a simple courthouse ceremony. No dress fittings, no cake tastings, just rings, vows, and a belief in forever. Nate never knew Sophie's full story. He knew about her art, her hometown, that she liked jasmine tea and hated conflict. But he didn't know about her brief internship at Renault Capital during her senior year. Didn't know that Julien Renault himself had once looked at her sketchbook and said, "You see the world differently. Never stop drawing it." Didn't know that Julien had offered her a job, and that she had turned it down. Because back then, she believed love mattered more than legacy. She wanted to build something with Nate, not for Nate. She wanted normal, a modest house, a garden, a baby. And for a while, that dream felt real. Sophie Lane didn't post about her marriage online. No curated selfies, no anniversary captions, no couple TikToks. She believed in privacy. She thought what they had was sacred, even when cracks started forming. When Nate began staying out late for team drinks. When his tone turned sharp and his compliments disappeared. When she found a receipt from a luxury spa in a neighborhood she'd never visited. She didn't yell. She didn't snoop. She just hoped. Hoped that he was just stressed. That the man she married would come back. That once the baby came, he'd remember how it felt to love her. She found out she was pregnant in late winter. It was raining. She had a cold. The test was positive in less than a minute. She wrapped the baby's shoes in a gift box, wrote a card that said, "I can't wait to meet you, Daddy." He opened it, went pale, said nothing. Then, "I'm not ready." By morning, he was gone. By afternoon, she was blocked, on everything. Sophie didn't scream. She didn't chase him. She didn't even try to call after day 3. Instead, she made a cup of tea, sat at her tiny kitchen table, and cried until the tea turned cold. Then she picked up her phone, recorded a 2-minute video. No script, no edits, just raw truth. "Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm 5 months pregnant, and my husband blocked me on everything after I told him." She posted it, closed the app. By the time she woke up, she had gone viral. What people didn't see was the way she held her stomach at night. The way she whispered to her unborn baby, "It's okay, I'm still here." The way she played piano late at night just to stop her thoughts from spiraling. Sophie Lane wasn't trying to become a symbol. She was trying to survive. But the world had already made up its mind. To them, she was resilience personified. And slowly, Sophie began to believe it too. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a soft voice saying, "I'm not done yet." Sometimes, the prettiest rooms hold the ugliest secrets. The Renault Foundation's annual Winter Gala wasn't just a party. It was the event. Held at the historic Royal Belmont Hotel in downtown Manhattan, the gala was where fortunes were pledged, alliances were forged, and scandals were born behind crystal flutes and designer gowns. It was invite only. And this year, for the first time, Sophie Lane was on the list. The marble floors glistened like a frozen lake under the light of $10,000 chandeliers. Waiters in black vests and white gloves moved like shadows between the tables, balancing trays of champagne and caviar. At every corner, whispered conversations floated in the air. Business deals disguised as small talk, compliments laced with envy. It was beauty, power, and performance wrapped into one perfect illusion. And at the center of it all was Julien Renault. Sophie hadn't seen him in years, not since her internship. Back then, he was just the intimidating CEO with eyes that missed nothing. But now, he looked older, sharper, wiser, his hair dusted with gray, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection. He stood at the far end of the ballroom, surrounded by billionaires and political influencers. But when he saw Sophie step in, he left them all behind. She didn't arrive quietly. Dressed in a satin midnight blue maternity gown that hugged her curves and shimmered beneath the golden light, Sophie moved through the crowd like poetry. Heads turned, whispers followed. But she didn't flinch. She had Julien by her side. He offered her his arm not out of charity, but out of protection. Not because she was weak, but because he respected her strength. This wasn't just a gala anymore. It was a reckoning. 2 weeks earlier, Sophie had posted her video. Now she had agents, sponsors, a growing following. But tonight wasn't about followers. Tonight was about facing it all. The betrayal, the abandonment, the humiliation. Because Nate Holloway was there. Of course he was. Dressed in a designer suit, laughing too loudly, trying too hard, and clinging to Bryn, his new girlfriend, like a lifeboat. They weren't on the guest list, but someone had pulled strings. Or maybe Nate came with a business contact. Either way, he didn't expect to see Sophie. And he definitely didn't expect to see her like this. Not glowing, not composed, not radiant, not escorted by Julien Renault. Sophie felt his eyes on her the second she entered. She didn't look. She didn't need to. But Bryn did. Bryn stared like she'd seen a ghost. Her lips twisted into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And then, in the middle of polite laughter and champagne clinks, she leaned in and whispered something in Nate's ear. He turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, the whole room disappeared. No music, no noise, just silence and tension thick enough to drown in. Sophie didn't blink. She didn't wave. She simply turned her face slightly toward Julien and whispered, "Let's get a drink." The ballroom was split between those pretending not to notice and those recording from behind champagne glasses. Sophie knew what they were thinking. She knew what they whispered. Is that her? The pregnant one? She went viral, right? Wait, is that Julien Renault next to her? She looks different. And she did, because she wasn't the girl Nate left behind anymore. She was stronger, calmer, untouchable. Julien led her to a private seating area near the center of the ballroom, a raised platform flanked by velvet ropes. Only top donors and VIPs sat there. Sophie settled in beside him, her posture straight, her hand gently resting on her stomach. Cameras flashed, conversations slowed. Julien didn't speak at first. He let her absorb the moment. Then, softly, he said, "You don't have to say anything. Just sit, breathe, let the room come to you." Sophie nodded, and slowly she did. It didn't take long for the drama to find her. Nate, unable to stay in the shadows, made his move. He approached with a drink in hand and a smile that was more performance than apology. "Soph," he said. She looked up slowly, blinking once. "Nate." Bryn followed behind him, silent but watchful. "You look, wow," he continued. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I live in the city," she replied evenly. "And I was invited." He scratched his neck. "Yeah, of course. I mean, I saw the video. Didn't know you were going to take it public." Julian didn't rise, but his eyes locked onto Nate like a hawk spotting prey. Sophie sipped her sparkling water. "Funny, you weren't worried about being public when you blocked me on everything." Nate cleared his throat. "It's complicated." "No," she said, voice steady. "It's actually very simple." Bryn crossed her arms. "This is getting dramatic." Sophie turned toward her. "You're right. Let's end the scene here." And just like that, she turned back to Julian. Nate stood there, stunned. Then Julian finally spoke. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "some men lose good women quietly. Others do it publicly and permanently. You're the latter." Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By dessert, it was all anyone could talk about. By midnight, it was trending on X. Pregnant and unbothered. Gala Queen Sophie, Julian had time. The moment had gone viral again. But Sophie didn't check her phone. She sat with her head held high, fingers curled softly around her baby bump. She wasn't here to trend. She was here to reclaim the space she was once denied. The gala raised over $20 million that night for underprivileged education programs. Julian gave a powerful speech about the future of leadership. And Sophie? She stood on stage for just 2 minutes. No tears, no speech, just presence. And sometimes presence is louder than any words. As the night came to a close and guests filtered out into the cold New York air, Julian placed his coat over Sophie's shoulders. "You did well tonight," he said. "I didn't do much," she replied. He smiled. "Exactly. Because when you know your worth, you don't have to prove it. You just have to show up." And tonight, Sophie Lane showed up. Not every villain wears black. Some wear cologne and fake apologies. To the outside world, Nate Holloway was the guy you rooted for. Charming, handsome, self-made. He could talk his way into a job, a meeting, a woman's heart. His Instagram bio read, "Visionary, coffee addict, tech disruptor." His posts were filtered just right. Selfies from networking brunches, gym mirror shots, and inspirational quotes stolen from books he never finished reading. He was the man people wanted to be. Until Sophie told the truth. Then he became the man people wanted to avoid. Nate hadn't always been toxic. That's what made it so hard. In the beginning, he'd been sweet, attentive. He remembered Sophie's favorite tea, brought her sketchbooks when she was low on ideas, sat through her indie film pics, and even cried at The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. He said she was magic. But magic, to a man like Nate, was only appealing when it stayed soft, silent, and easily controlled. The cracks showed slowly. He started coming home late, blaming deadlines. Then the blame shifted. "You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. Not everything's about you, Sophie." Then came the gaslighting. He once forgot her birthday but turned it into a fight about her expectations. The deeper Sophie fell in love, the higher his standards rose and the more he resented her calm. He wanted chaos. But Sophie wasn't built for chaos. She was built for depth. And he drowned in it. When she told him about the pregnancy, he looked at her like she'd stabbed him. She expected fear. What she didn't expect was silence. The kind of silence that screamed. The kind of silence that doesn't come from shock, but from calculation. Because Nate had already made up his mind, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. He didn't say goodbye when he left. He didn't send a follow-up text. No questions about the baby. Not even a "hope you're okay." Instead, he disappeared like a magician slipping behind a curtain. Then, 2 weeks later, he reappeared on social media. With Bryn. Bryn Matheson was everything Sophie wasn't. Glossy, curated, loud. A real estate lifestyle influencer who wore highlighter like armor and captions like weapons. Her feed was full of beach vacations, detox smoothies, and motivational quotes like, "If he doesn't elevate you, he's not your man." Bryn believed in manifestation, crystals, and having the last word. She also believed that Sophie Lane was beneath her. After all, Bryn had the man, the ring, the yacht selfies, and a front row seat to his collapse. What Bryn didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Sophie had something more dangerous than beauty or revenge. She had the truth. And the truth doesn't disappear just because you pretend it's ugly. After Sophie's video went viral, Nate panicked. He told Bryn the clip was taken out of context. He said Sophie was emotional, unhinged, doing it for attention. He spun stories fast until even he couldn't keep track of the lies. Still, Bryn believed him, because belief was easier than reality, and Bryn needed to believe she was the upgrade, the better version, the prize. Together, Nate and Bryn built a brand around denial. They posted couple TikToks, podcasted about betrayal culture and emotional manipulation. Nate went on an Instagram Live and claimed Sophie was using the pregnancy for clout. The backlash was instant. Women flooded the comment section. Blocked her while pregnant? You're trash. She's carrying your child, bro. This is exactly why women don't speak up. But Nate didn't back down. Neither did Bryn. They leaned in. They called it online bullying. They positioned themselves as victims of cancel culture. As if Sophie's heartbreak was a publicity stunt and not a reality check. At the Winter Gala, when Sophie appeared with Julian Renault, Nate's carefully crafted ego cracked. He hadn't expected her to glow. He hadn't expected her to be protected. He thought she'd be crying on some stranger's couch, not walking into a ballroom like she owned it. Julian Renault wasn't just a billionaire. He was power. And when power walks beside the woman you discarded, you feel small. And for the first time in his life, Nate felt microscopic. After the gala confrontation went viral, Nate lost a brand deal, then another. Then 2 clients dropped him. Suddenly, people stopped answering his emails. He went from rising star to problematic ex in one TikTok cycle. Bryn's followers dipped by 30%. She blamed the algorithm. But the truth was simpler. People were tired of villains in pretty packaging. Nate tried to spin it one more time. He made a video, this time without filters. Hair messy, tones soft. I made mistakes, he said. I was scared. I wasn't ready. He looked directly into the camera. I still care about Sophie. I always will. It almost worked, until a Reddit user exposed that the video was recorded in a rented Airbnb staged to look humble. The internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive liars. Meanwhile, Sophie remained silent. She didn't comment. She didn't clap back. She posted a sketch of a tree growing from a broken sidewalk. No caption, just that. It went viral again. Because real strength doesn't scream, it just grows. By the time Nate realized what he had lost, it was too late. Bryn started distancing herself. His podcast sponsors pulled out, and Sophie, she signed a book deal and declined every interview that mentioned his name. Because some villains don't deserve closure. They deserve silence. Nate Holloway wasn't evil. He was weak. And weakness, when combined with ego, becomes cruelty. He didn't destroy Sophie. He revealed her. And she wasn't the woman who got left behind. She was the woman who walked away. He thought he could humiliate her. He didn't know the world was watching. There are moments in life that feel like slow motion. Not because time actually stops, but because your brain knows something unforgettable is about to happen. The air changes, the noise fades, everything sharpens. That was the moment Sophie Lane walked into the center of the ballroom and saw Nate Holloway smirking in a circle of cameras, holding Bryn by the waist like she was a trophy. It wasn't the sight of him that stung. It was the performative way he kissed Bryn's cheek in front of the photographers. Deliberate, cold, cruel. The Royal Belmont Hotel's grand ballroom was at capacity. Over 300 guests, dressed in silk and satin, filled the space with expensive laughter and carefully measured compliments. The clinking of crystal glasses, the hum of an orchestra, and the buzz of billionaires striking silent deals in corners filled the air. But when Sophie entered, everything shifted. She wasn't just another guest anymore. She was the main event. Julian Renault, calm and poised beside her, leaned down and whispered, "Are you ready?" Sophie smiled. "Let's give them something to talk about." And then she stepped forward. All eyes followed. Phones lifted. The cameras clicked like a rainstorm. Nate saw her before Bryn did. He choked slightly on his champagne. The glow on Sophie's face, the confidence in her stride, the way the light caught her cheekbones like she was carved from gold. He wasn't prepared. He hadn't seen her since the night he threw her out of their apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a heartache. But here she was, pregnant, proud, and more powerful than ever, and right next to Julian freaking Renault. "Wait, is that?" Bryn turned, her fake eyelashes fluttering in confusion. "Is that Sophie?" Nate didn't answer. He couldn't. Bryn narrowed her eyes. Why is she here? Who invited her? That's when Julian and Sophie walked straight past them. No glance, no acknowledgement, as if they were ghosts. Nate opened his mouth, maybe to say something, maybe to warn Sophie not to cause a scene, but someone from the press recognized Julian and called out. "Mr. Renault, is this the Sophie Lane from the viral video?" Another shouted, "Is she really the mother of your godchild?" Julian raised an eyebrow and smirked. "She's family." And just like that, every camera turned, every mic pointed, and Sophie stood at the center of it all. A reporter pushed through the crowd. "Sophie, what do you say to people who think you're using your story for fame?" Sophie turned to the woman, smiled gently, and said, "The only thing I used was my voice, and it turns out people were ready to listen." The ballroom erupted in applause. Not fake, polite applause, real applause, because everyone had seen it. The viral video, the heartbreak, the strength, and now they were seeing the woman who lived through it, and didn't just survive, but rose. That's when it happened. Bryn, never one to be outshined, marched toward Sophie like a woman walking into battle in 6-inch heels. She grabbed a champagne flute from a passing tray. She smiled like a villain rehearsing her monologue. And then she said, loud enough for cameras to catch, "You're still milking this pity party, huh?" The room gasped. Nate didn't stop her. He just stood there, silent. Sophie blinked once. "Excuse me? You're acting like you're some sort of hero," Bryn said. "But let's be real, if you were that special, he wouldn't have left." Julian moved to step in, but Sophie raised a hand. She turned fully to Bryn, her voice calm but crystal sharp. "If I wasn't special, then why did he block me instead of facing me?" Bryn rolled her eyes. Sophie continued, louder now. "Why did he lie about me online, call me manipulative when I was the one carrying his child?" Murmurs rippled across the room. Cameras rolled. "And if I'm not special," Sophie said, stepping closer, "then why are you so desperate to tear me down in front of all these people?" Bryn faltered. Sophie turned to the crowd. "Let's be honest, this isn't about a dress, or attention, or who got dumped. This is about how women like me are treated when we stop being convenient." The applause was instant. Thunderous. Some people even stood. Nate finally tried to speak. "Sophie, maybe we can talk later, in private." She looked him dead in the eye. "There's nothing private left, Nate. You made sure of that." And then she did something that would live forever in screenshots and Instagram reels. She placed a hand on her belly, turned to Julian, and said, "Let's go. My child doesn't need to hear any more excuses." They walked away to a standing ovation. Nate stood frozen. Bryn was speechless, and the internet exploded. By midnight, the clip had hit 3.2 million views. By sunrise, it was 10 million. Hashtags trended globally. Pregnant power, Sophie wins, blocked but blessed, Galagate. Influencers reposted it, celebrities quoted it, politicians tweeted about it. And somewhere in a silent apartment in Brooklyn, Nate Holloway scrolled through the comments with shaking hands. This is what accountability looks like. She didn't need revenge, she just needed the truth. God, I hope my daughter grows up like Sophie. Back in her hotel suite, Sophie sat barefoot, dress draped over a velvet chair, a bowl of cereal on her lap. Julian poured her tea and said, "You're trending on 5 continents." She laughed softly. "For telling the truth?" "For owning it," he corrected. She placed a hand over her stomach. "Do you think they'll remember this moment?" Julian nodded. "They won't forget." And neither would Nate, because some betrayals become headlines, but some women turn them into history. Even strong women crack. The difference is, they know how to rebuild. The applause faded. The flashes stopped. The ballroom emptied. But the noise in Sophie Lane's head kept echoing long after the gala ended. Back in her suite at the Belmont, everything looked perfect. Rose petals on the bed, a tray of untouched chocolate truffles, a handwritten card from Julian's staff that said, "To new beginnings." But Sophie didn't feel new. She felt broken. Again. The minute she shut the door behind her, the tears came. Not quiet, pretty ones, but heavy, body-shaking sobs that made her knees buckle and her hands search for a wall to hold on to. She slid down to the carpet, the softness of it no match for the sharpness inside her chest. Everything she'd held back at the gala came crashing down like a wave with no warning. Not because of Nate, but because healing still hurt. She had told the world she was okay. She had stood tall, delivered one of the most shared viral moments of the year, but she hadn't had a chance to feel. To grieve, to breathe. For weeks she'd been in motion, responding to media, signing contracts, accepting praise, but now in the silence the reality hit. She was pregnant, alone, exhausted, and no amount of likes or retweets could erase the memory of being discarded like she didn't matter. Sophie lay on the floor for 20 minutes, crying. Not for Nate, but for the version of herself who begged him to stay. The version who thought she wasn't enough. The woman who wrapped baby shoes in a box and believed it would make him love her again. She mourned her own innocence, that soft hope that had made her believe loyalty could save a one-sided love. Her phone buzzed. She didn't answer. She stared at the screen and let it ring. Then another message came in. This one from Julian. Check the fridge. Left something for you. Eat, then sleep. Don't make me break the door down. She almost smiled. Almost. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her silk robe and stumbled to the kitchen. Inside the fridge, a container of chicken soup. A handwritten label that read, "No press tonight, just food." It was still warm. He must have had it delivered just before they left the gala. She ate it standing up. One spoonful. Then another. Her stomach hurt, but the baby kicked, reminding her, "You're not alone." Not anymore. That was the thing about pregnancy. Every emotion was magnified. Joy became euphoria. Sadness became despair. And tonight, despair wrapped its fingers around her and refused to let go. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window. The skyline glittered. People were out there, dancing, drinking, living. Meanwhile, she was alone in a hotel room trying to convince herself she was okay. But she wasn't. She felt used. Not just by Nate, but by the world. The comments online were mostly supportive, but the negative ones still found her. She's just looking for sympathy. Why is she acting like a hero? She got dumped like everyone else. Another clout-chasing single mom. She had tried to ignore them, but tonight they sank in. They stuck. By midnight, she had deleted the apps from her phone. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. She needed quiet. The kind no algorithm could offer. The kind where no one asked for a comment, a quote, a statement. She was tired of being brave. She just wanted to be. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom. Her makeup had smeared. Her eyes were swollen. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. But when she looked down at her belly, she saw purpose. The baby kicked again, like a soft reminder. "You don't get to give up." She whispered, "I'm trying." Then louder, "I swear I'm trying." She didn't expect an answer, but something about saying it out loud felt like oxygen. She finally crawled into bed at 2:14 a.m., wrapped herself in a hotel blanket that smelled like lavender and bleach. The pillow was too soft. Her thoughts too loud, but eventually, she slept. Not because she was at peace, but because exhaustion finally won. Morning came too soon. Sunlight poked through the curtains, cutting across her face like judgment. She didn't want to move, but her phone buzzed again. This time it was her sister. "You okay?" And a second text right after. "I saw the clip. You were incredible, but please don't burn out." Sophie stared at the screen, then typed one word, "trying," and hit send. She got up, showered, pulled her hair into a bun, refused to look at headlines. Instead, she turned on music. Something soft. Ella Fitzgerald. She made toast, ate half, drank orange juice, and felt the smallest bit of herself return. Not the public Sophie, not the viral sensation, just the girl who once loved rainy mornings and empty notebooks. By noon, she was packed, ready to leave the hotel, back to her tiny apartment where nothing matched and everything smelled like vanilla candles. Julian offered to send a driver. She declined. She needed to walk, to feel the city, to ground herself again. So she did. 7 blocks, 4 crosswalks, 2 paparazzi sightings she ignored, and finally home. The apartment was still hers, still small, still filled with sketches and half-eaten boxes of cereal. But when she stepped inside, she didn't cry. She exhaled. This space, unlike the gala, the cameras, the chaos, knew her. And that was enough. She sat at her desk, pulled out her sketch pad, and started to draw. Not for a brand, not for a publisher, just for herself. A woman in a storm, holding a child, not standing tall but not falling either, just surviving. Because breakdowns don't mean failure. They mean you cared deeply, loved truly, and now you're healing honestly. And that's the real strength. They thought she was fragile, but she was never alone. Everyone thought they knew Sophie Lane's story, the quiet girl who got dumped, the pregnant ex who went viral, the woman who showed grace at a gala but sobbed in private. They thought that was the full picture. But Sophie was never just a heartbreak victim, and she was never really alone, because Sophie had a secret, one that no one, not Nate, not Bryn, not even the press, had figured out. And when the truth came out, it didn't just change her narrative, it flipped the entire game. Julien Renaud wasn't just some billionaire CEO with a soft spot for a pregnant girl he used to mentor. He was family. Not by blood, but by something deeper. Loyalty. Legacy. History. When Sophie was 21, a college senior, she applied for an internship at Renaud Capital on a whim. Everyone told her she wouldn't get it. She didn't go to an Ivy League school, she didn't have a 4.0 GPA. But she sent in her portfolio anyway. 3 children's book illustrations, a storyboard concept, and a note that said, "Stories shape the world. I'd like to help tell better ones." 2 days later, she got the interview. A week after that, she was sitting in a penthouse office with Julien Renaud himself. He didn't look at her resume, he looked at her art, and said, "You're not just talented, you're different. Don't lose that." She worked under Julien for 1 summer, shadowed meetings, took notes, designed pitch decks for charities, even helped storyboard a digital literacy program for inner-city schools. Julien saw something in her. Not just talent, but integrity. They stayed in touch after the internship. Emails, calls, coffee when he visited Seattle. And when Sophie got married, she didn't invite him. Not because she didn't want to, but because Nate didn't like the idea of her having male friends. So she pulled away. Not entirely, but enough. Still, Julien kept an eye on her from a distance. When her video went viral, Julien didn't call her immediately. He waited. He watched. He saw the hurt in her eyes, the weight in her posture. And when she walked into that gala with him, he made a choice. No more hiding, no more quiet protection. It was time for the world to know who she really was. 3 days after the gala, Renaud Capital released a press statement. In bold, elegant font, "We are proud to announce that Sophie Lane has joined the Renaud Foundation as Creative Director of Global Initiatives." Attached was a photo of Sophie, smiling, poised, pregnant, standing beside Julien at a conference table. The press lost its mind. People had questions. Wait, she's working with him now? Was she connected to him this whole time? Is this why Nate's been silent? But it wasn't just a job. It was a reveal. Sophie wasn't some random woman who got lucky going viral. She had credentials, talent, and a seat at the table, one that couldn't be taken from her. The job wasn't a publicity stunt. It had been offered quietly 2 weeks earlier. Sophie had accepted on one condition. "I don't want pity. I want purpose." Julien smiled. "You've always had that. Now you just have power, too." Within days, Sophie was trending again. But this time, it wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about power. Resilience. A woman taking control of her narrative. The first initiative she led? A campaign called Unblocked. A digital platform for women who had been ghosted, emotionally abused, or abandoned during pregnancy. She partnered with mental health nonprofits, OBGYN networks, and legal advisors. And she did it all while 7 months pregnant. Nate saw the press conference on Twitter. She was wearing a black pantsuit, hair slicked back, holding a microphone like a weapon. He didn't recognize her, and in a way, he never really had. Sophie didn't respond to Nate's passive-aggressive texts, or the emails begging for a conversation, or the voice message that said, "I don't want to fight anymore. Can we just talk like adults?" She had nothing to say. Because silence, when chosen, is power. The media tried to spin the story. Did Julien Renaud always plan this? Is this an act of revenge? How did a freelance illustrator become the face of a billion-dollar initiative? But Sophie didn't play their game. She gave one interview. Just one. In it, she said, "People underestimated me because I didn't scream. But I was never silent. I was surviving. And now, I'm building." That quote was printed on tote bags, shared on stories, tattooed even by a woman in Miami who DM'd her, "You saved me. You reminded me I'm allowed to start over." Sophie wasn't the victim anymore. She was the architect of her healing, of her legacy, of a future her child would be proud to inherit. She did not become famous by accident. She became necessary. A reminder that broken doesn't mean finished, and soft doesn't mean weak. When asked why she didn't reveal her connection to Julien sooner, Sophie said, "Because I wanted people to believe in the version of me that had nothing." The girl sitting on the floor crying in a hoodie. That girl mattered too, and she did. Because the twist wasn't that Sophie had powerful friends. The twist was that Sophie had always been powerful. She just finally stopped hiding it. She didn't change for them. She evolved for herself. Sophie Lane didn't wake up one day and decide to become unrecognizable. It wasn't a revenge body. It wasn't a glam squad makeover. It wasn't some social media stunt to flex on her ex. It was something deeper, more sacred. She was becoming the version of herself she'd always quietly dreamed of, but never had the courage to fully step into. Not because she wasn't capable, but because she used to think staying small kept the peace. Now she knew better. Peace didn't come from shrinking. It came from expansion. It started with a mirror. 3 weeks after the gala, she stood in front of it, staring at her reflection. The woman in the glass had stretch marks on her belly, puffiness around her eyes, and a calmness that radiated like armor. She looked like someone who had seen hell and walked out carrying light. Still, Sophie whispered, "Who are you now?" And a tiny voice inside her answered, "Someone no one gets to discard again." She called her friend Olivia, a stylist, fashion editor, one of those women who could see a dress and know what emotion it would give off from 20 feet away. Sophie said, "I want to look like how I feel, not how I used to beg to be seen." Olivia grinned. "Say no more." They started with colors. Out went the beige, the soft pastels, the clothes that begged for invisibility. In came power. Emerald green, deep red, black so rich it absorbed light. They tailored everything, not to hide her bump but to honor it. Sharp blazers, silk-wrapped dresses, jewelry that didn't whisper but made statements. Her favorite piece? A gold necklace that read, "Unbothered." Next came hair. She didn't chop it all off in a fit of rage. No, she went to the best salon in New York, told them, "I want clean, grown, timeless." They gave her soft waves, a warmer tone. Something that caught the light when she walked into a room. She didn't look like a different person. She looked like a woman who finally saw herself. Her apartment transformed too. Out went the broken lamp Nate never fixed, the couch where she cried the night he left, the dishes they bought as a couple. She replaced them with pieces she chose, intentionally. Each shelf told a new story. Books on art, business, healing. A framed photo of her first ultrasound. A print that read, "You are not here to be small. You are here to take up space." The biggest transformation wasn't physical. It was internal. She started therapy twice a week, journaled daily, walked 3 miles every morning, not for weight loss, but to feel her feet on the earth again. She read books on boundaries, emotional abuse, feminine power. She cried during meditations, laughed during voice notes with Olivia, and slowly, the old Sophie began to dissolve. Not disappear, but melt into something wiser, something permanent. Julian noticed the shift. "You're different," he said during a board meeting. "I'm clear," Sophie replied. "There's a difference." He smiled. "Keep going." She did. Her foundation, Unblocked, received a $5 million grant from a global health organization. Sophie didn't post about it. She simply got to work, building online communities, funding local shelters, hosting workshops for young moms who'd been ghosted by partners who couldn't handle growth. One teenage girl said, "I didn't think I mattered until I saw your video." Sophie hugged her and whispered, "You matter before anyone believes in you, including yourself." As the months passed, Sophie embraced the idea of power, not as domination, but as presence. She stopped apologizing before speaking, stopped explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her, stopped dimming her ideas in boardrooms just to protect male egos. She became a leader, not by demand, but by demonstration. She filmed a video series called Becoming Her, not about fashion, not about gossip, but about real transformation, healing, heartbreak, hormones, hope. Millions watched, thousands cried. And Sophie? She finally felt like she was living a story she was proud to write. When her baby shower came around, she didn't invite old friends out of guilt. She invited the people who showed up when it was messy. Olivia, her sister, Julian, 3 nonprofit directors, 4 single mothers from her program. They sat in a Brooklyn garden, surrounded by sunflowers, laughing over vegan cupcakes and stories of resilience. Sophie wore white, and for the first time in forever, she glowed without effort. One of the women leaned over and said, "If your ex could see you now." Sophie smiled. "He can. Everyone can." But that wasn't the point. She wasn't doing this to haunt him. She was doing it to heal herself. The night after the shower, she sat alone on her balcony, watching the city lights blink like stars. She was 8 months pregnant. Her feet were swollen, her back ached, but her heart, peaceful, full. She whispered to her belly, "We made it, baby, and we're just getting started." Because transformation isn't just about aesthetics. It's about deciding you'll never again beg to be chosen. You'll choose yourself. And when you do, the world will start to adjust to your light. She didn't scream. She didn't throw punches. She walked in and made the room shift. The Renault Foundation's Spring Leadership Summit wasn't built for drama. It was for CEOs, policymakers, and thought leaders. Serious people in serious suits talking about serious problems. But this year, it became the stage for something no one would ever forget. Because Sophie Lane was giving the keynote speech. It had been nearly 6 months since her viral moment at the gala. 3 months since she took her role as creative director for the Renault Foundation. 1 month since her baby shower. And now the world waited to hear what she'd say. The ballroom was brighter this time. Floral installations climbed every column. The theme, Women Who Build. Sophie stood backstage in a cream power suit, her baby bump outlined gracefully beneath a silk blouse. She wasn't nervous, not anymore. She'd faced silence, shame, abandonment. This was hers. The host introduced her. A woman who turned heartbreak into healing and healing into a movement. Please welcome Sophie Lane. The applause rose like a wave. Sophie stepped onto the stage. No flashy music, no dramatic lighting, just presence. She stood at the center, looked out at the crowd, and took a breath. Then softly she began. "I never wanted to be famous," she said. "I just wanted to be heard." A hush fell over the room. "I was blocked, digitally, emotionally, legally, from the person who helped create the child I'm about to bring into the world." Murmurs stirred. She continued. "I was told I was too emotional, too dramatic, too loud, but also too quiet, too nice, too soft." Pause. "And in being all of those things, I realized I wasn't too much, or too little. I was just right. For me." Applause. But she wasn't finished. "I'm not here today to talk about an ex," she said. "He's not worth this mic." Laughter. Knowing nods. "I'm here because when I posted that 2-minute video from my kitchen table, I didn't know it would change my life. But more importantly, I didn't know how many of you needed it." She clicked a button. Behind her, the screen lit up with thousands of comments. All real. All from women. "This saved me. I left him. I kept my baby. I chose peace." The audience watched in awe. "Those messages aren't just comments," Sophie said. "They're proof. Proof that when one woman tells the truth, she frees others to do the same." And then came the part no one expected. "I want to show you what blocked really looks like," she said, pulling out her phone. She opened a screenshot. A conversation. A timestamp. It was a message from Nate, from 3 weeks ago. "You win. Can we talk?" The room gasped. Sophie didn't blink. "This is the man who called me manipulative, who said I was doing it for clout, who blocked me on every platform while I held a positive pregnancy test in one hand and a broken heart in the other." Another slide appeared. His voice message. "Maybe I panicked. Maybe you were too much pressure. I just didn't know how to be a dad yet." She let the words hang, then looked directly at the camera being live-streamed across 3 continents. "Nate, I hope you're watching, because this is your answer. You're not being blocked. You're being removed." The crowd erupted, not in cruelty, but in power, because this wasn't revenge for the sake of pain. This was accountability. Later that evening, clips of her speech flooded social media. Sophie Lane shuts down X in the classiest way possible. "You're not blocked. You're removed." Iconic. This is how you reclaim your power. The hashtags trended. Removed, not blocked. Sophie said it. No more Nates. But the real revenge? It didn't happen on a stage. It happened quietly, behind closed doors. 2 days later, when Sophie met with her legal team, she filed a formal notice. Custody papers. No drama, no tabloid leaks, just firm, legal boundaries. She didn't ask Nate to co-parent. She offered supervised visitation with proof of therapy and a court-reviewed parenting plan. He tried to argue. She had receipts. She had screenshots. She had a legal team bigger than his ego. A week later, a podcast tried to book Nate. He declined. Then his publicist quit. Then his manager quietly removed his name from the startup's website. The internet forgot him. Sophie didn't. But she no longer cared. Because the point of healing isn't forgetting. It's choosing what no longer deserves your energy. Meanwhile, Sophie's initiative tripled in funding. She launched a scholarship fund in her baby's name. She gave an interview with Time magazine. She was invited to speak at the UN, not for being betrayed, but for how she rebuilt. And when journalists asked, was that speech revenge? She smiled and said, no, that was closure. And sometimes closure happens on stage, because revenge isn't loud, it's quiet power. It's walking back into a room you were once chased out of and having every head turn, not because you're petty, but because you've become undeniable. Sophie Lane never begged for justice. She became it. She wasn't looking for validation. She became the validation. The hospital room was quiet, white walls, soft beeping machines, the scent of disinfectant mixed with blooming flowers on the windowsill. Sophie Lane lay in bed holding her newborn son against her chest. He was barely 2 hours old, 7 pounds, 9 ounces, dark hair like hers. Eyes too new to focus but already full of wonder. She had imagined this moment for months, feared it, prayed through it. And now, here it was. No photographers, no hashtags, no speeches, just her and him. And a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. Her sister sat beside her, gently brushing a hand over the baby's tiny foot. You did it, she whispered. Sophie looked down, tears pricking her eyes. No, she said, we did. Because this wasn't just her victory. It was for every woman who had ever been silenced. Every woman who had been told you're too much or you're not enough. Every single mother who carried both a baby and the weight of being left behind. This child, he was more than proof of survival. He was a symbol of choice, of dignity, of starting over. The morning after the birth, Sophie posted a photo on her private Instagram. Just her hand, holding her son's. The caption? Born in truth, raised in power. Nothing more. And still, the image spread like wildfire. Fans reposted it, supporters commented by the thousands, even critics stayed silent, because no one could deny the beauty of it. Of a woman who was supposed to break, and instead gave life. 2 weeks later, she gave her final public address before stepping away from the spotlight. She stood on a small stage at a local women's center she helped fund, dressed in jeans and a soft cardigan, her baby strapped to her chest. No flashing lights, no glam team, just real women, real stories, and her truth. I've shared a lot with the world this past year, Sophie began. Heartbreak, pregnancy, power, revenge, healing. She paused, adjusting the sleeping baby against her. But the truth is, this was never about me. Heads nodded. This story is yours. It belongs to every woman who ever had to choose herself when someone else walked away. The room went still. I didn't win because I had a billionaire's support. I didn't win because I went viral. I won the moment I stopped needing to be chosen. Her voice was steady, not dramatic, not loud, just certain. I stopped trying to be the cool girl, the chill wife, the forgiving ex. I started being me. Applause rose, but she didn't pause for it. She had more to say. There's a version of you that's waiting. She's louder, braver, softer, fiercer. She wears what she wants, says what she means, leaves when she's disrespected. She doesn't cry quietly in the bathroom. She doesn't wait for the apology that never comes. She doesn't beg for closure. Sophie looked out at the women in front of her. She is the closure. Tears filled eyes across the room. Even the volunteers in the back stopped to listen. You don't owe anyone your silence, Sophie said. You don't owe anyone your body, your time, your forgiveness. You only owe yourself one thing, freedom. She placed a hand on her baby's back and smiled. I want my son to grow up knowing strength isn't loud. It's consistent, it's graceful, it's honest. And I want him to know that women are not fragile. They are fire. When the speech ended, the women didn't just clap. They stood, cried, held each other, because they didn't just hear her story. They felt it. And in feeling it, they found pieces of their own stories too. Sophie stayed behind to talk. No VIP exits. She hugged a teenage girl who had escaped an abusive home, signed a copy of her memoir for a grandmother raising her grandchild alone, and told a quiet woman in the back row, "You're not invisible. Not to me. Not anymore." She walked out of that center not as a celebrity, but as something stronger, a mirror, a lighthouse, a permission slip for others to rise. That night, she laid her son down in his crib, kissed his forehead, then stood at the window, staring out at the city she once feared. She remembered being 22 and crying into her pillow after Nate first called her too clingy. She remembered sleeping on a friend's couch, 6 weeks pregnant, scared and ashamed. She remembered checking her phone, hoping for a message that never came. And now? Now she didn't wait for anyone's message. She was the message. Before she went to bed, she wrote one last line in her journal. He blocked me to escape the truth. I spoke the truth and set myself free. She underlined it, closed the book, and turned out the light. Because this story was never about revenge. It was about redemption, about choosing self-respect over silence, purpose over pain, power over permission, and proving once and for all that when a woman finally chooses herself, she doesn't lose anything. She wins everything. So the story has ended. And our wonderful friends, are you still here? If you're hearing this now, then something in Sophie's journey touched a piece of your heart. Maybe it was the betrayal, maybe the healing, or maybe it's that quiet strength you've also had to summon in your own life. You see, this story isn't just about Sophie. It's about every woman who chose herself when it would have been easier to disappear. It's proof that pain doesn't define you. Your courage does. Like the saying goes, she stood in the storm, and when the wind did not blow her way, she adjusted her sails. If you felt something, if you saw yourself or someone you love in this story, don't keep it to yourself. Please like this video, drop a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe so we can keep telling the stories that matter. Because healing is real, and stories like these remind us you are never, ever alone.